They left her to die. That was the thought that stuck in his head every time the silence pressed too hard. Though no one had left him here, he had walked into the woods on his own. The veteran carried scars that never fully closed, quiet as the trees around him, heavy as the pack across his shoulders. He moved as if patrolling through an enemy province, scanning, calculating, always listening. Out here, the wilderness did not mock him like people sometimes did. Still, the hush of pine needles and the broken glimpses of light carried their own weight of judgment. The man had chosen solitude after the war. Long nights, stiff mornings, survival trimmed to its absolute edge. There was comfort in that rhythm, control. But even a hardened body will flinch when something breaks routine. He had stopped near a creek bend when he first saw the animal, a pig. Strange, loose-bodied, with coarse hair that caught the sun. Not a farmyard fence in sight, not a village within a day's march. Yet there it stood, staring at him with the dark, steady look of a creature that had no right being this deep in wild country. He thought the pig would take off at the first movement, but it didn't. He stepped once to the side. The pig grunted low and shifted too. He narrowed his eyes, thinking of wild boar. But no, this animal bore a different shape. Rounder, softer. A domestic beast gone astray. The pig pawed at the earth and gave a sharp squeal that echoed through the branches. The veteran lifted his brow, uneasy. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. You'll hear this story in your own soil, I promise you. The man turned, meaning to head back to his fire pit, but the pig barked a sound again and trotted ahead into the narrow break where the understory thinned. Then it stopped, looked back. A glance full of command, impossible to ignore. The man's chest tightened. Left, he had safe ground and known bearings. Right, if he followed, there was only thicket and shadow. He rested his hand against an old scar beneath his shirt. Decision. Always a decision. His soldier's instinct muttered to avoid entanglements. Animals didn't summon you. Yet this one did. The pig's snout rooted impatiently in moss. Finally it let out such a high, stubborn cry that the sound pulled him forward in spite of himself. The veteran's boots sank into soil untouched by human paths. Branches snapped at his shoulders, as if scolding him for trespassing where even deer moved warily. What unsettled him most was the sense of intent. The pig didn't wander. It led. Every dozen paces it stopped and checked, making sure he kept pace. He muttered under his breath, words he wouldn't give to any man, words of weary suspicion. The longer he followed, the more his senses sharpened. He measured distance like in a war patrol. Each hollow, each ridge carried layers of memory. A minefield here, a sniper post there. But no, this was only woodland, whispering in different tongues. Still, his heart raced the same. The pig urged him deeper and deeper. He wondered if perhaps the beast was lost. Maybe it wanted him to find water, maybe food. But the way it pulled, the way it refused to leave him, it revealed a clarity that shamed those guesses. It knew something in these trees, something worth forcing a stranger to see. A crow called overhead, harsh and dire. The man flinched and then laughed once at himself. But the laugh died quick when the pig barked again and began running forward, tusks low to brush the undergrowth. The sound of breaking branches echoed like the snap of gunfire, and his chest seized. He quickened his step. Now there was no turning back. The forest held its breath, and every instinct in him told him this path had been written long before he arrived. He adjusted the rifle strap on his pack, though he carried no bullets anymore. It was only habit. Still, it gave him the weight of readiness. One final halt. The pig turned, eyes glinting, and then pushed on until the shapes of the land itself changed. The man knew, in that crushing silence at the rim of a clearing, that he either followed or remained prisoner to questions that would rot him worse than any scar. He drew a slow breath, boots heavy, and stepped deeper. He stood at the lip of the clearing, breathing hard, trying to measure the distance his boots had dragged him into a story he never wanted. The pig was waiting again, shoulders square, as though it had been issued orders. Strange thing about it, he'd seen men look back at him like that on patrol. Quick glance, sharp check to be sure he hadn't fallen behind. The same sense of quiet insistence. The veteran rubbed at his jaw, cracked lips brushing the lines of an old scar. He told himself it was foolishness to keep following. But the forest pressed him in. You know that feeling? The press, not from branches or slope, but from silence. As if unseen eyes wanted to see what you would do next. That's what held him. The pig snorted and trotted forward, weaving through brush. He sighed and fell in behind, boots crunching damp twigs. Years of soldiering left their mark in how he moved, scanning the ridgeline, noting cover, judging ground firmness. Survival habits cut deep, and he carried them like a weight he couldn't lay aside. Ahead, the pig's gray-whiskered face bobbed left and right as though charting invisible signposts. For a long while they climbed. The slope steepened quick. Roots snagged his soles. Sweat gathered under his collar. He winced with each pull of his shoulders against the packstrap. Halfway up, he crouched low, resting his hand on earth darkened with pine needles. The pig waited again, standing broad and certain on a shelf of lichen rock. Every few breaths it gave a low grunt like encouragement or command. He couldn't decipher which. Strange the way memories surfaced on such slopes. His breath hitched, and in that gap came sight of dunes long across the sea, smell of powder, the bitter stare of men who might never make it through the day. He shook it from him like shaking water from the eyes. Still, echoes linger. War doesn't need a battlefield. It can rebuild itself from soil, shadows, even the sound of a pig urging you upward. By the time the ridge flattened, his thighs burned and lungs pulled ragged. He dropped to one knee. The pig came close, snuffling at his boot. Its coarse hide brushed against him, solid and warm. He blinked at the oddness of it. Contact so simple, yet it steadied him in a way no comrade had in years. He muttered, "Guess you're not done with me yet." Words cracked the silence, not meant for echo but for release. They pressed onward. Underbrush knotted tight, clawing like wire. He lifted branches, shoved thorn against thorn, his jacket catching, ripping. Even as sweat stung his brow, he found himself wondering, why this trail? It wasn't some random waddle. The pig traced it like memory, as if the land whispered directions only it could hear. He remembered missions where scouts swore they felt the path before they ever saw it. Sometimes you trust a hunch because survival depends on it. Was that what this pig was? A strange scout, guiding him beyond his own refusal? He grimaced. Hard truth. About the only companion he had now was this animal. Perhaps that burned worst. Midway through a snarl of spruce, his boot slipped into hidden hollow. His ankle rolled, a shock of pain flashing through. He gritted teeth, bore down, shifted weight until he found steady rock. The pig grunted fierce, rushing back, circling him. He waved it off, spitting harsh breath. "I'm fine. Don't fuss." But he wasn't fine. He braced against bark, pain pulsing. That pig didn't leave, though. Stood fixed, like a corporal waiting for orders. And in that stubborn presence he gathered his grit again. He limped ahead until the sting dulled to something bearable. Evening light slanted sharper among trunks, thinning gold edges on shadow. Birds stuttered warning cries, then fell silent. The woods themselves seemed to hold out the next revelation like bait on a rough hook. He could smell damp rot, moss wound tight upon bark. And each time he thought the pig would slow, it bolted 2 paces, then checked him again, like a steady friend. You've likely known stubborn animals, ones that refuse to be led except in the direction they already mean to go. This pig carried that stubborn core, yet reversed what he expected. Instead of ignoring him, it pressed for him, demanded his company. As if whatever lay ahead required 2 hearts, not one. He started speaking more now. Low confessions no man would ever hear. He told the pig scraps about why he came to the forest, how nights gnawed more than days. Bits about comrades who didn't walk back. Words rolled out like small stones tossed aside on the trail. The animal never judged, never slowed. That quiet kind of listening can heal more than you'd believe. By the time moonlight bled pale above the pines, his body staggered from the travel. He thought about turning back, yet each time hesitation grew, the pig's grunt carried through darkness like a call. He had no map to trust, but its stubborn will. Someone once told him that leadership meant daring a step when no one else would. But maybe following required as much courage. His boots dragged, then lifted again, and with each stride the forest deepened into something more than wilderness. It became a gauntlet, coaxing his weakness out to be tested. Finally, they broke through another wall of brush into quieter ground. The air felt heavier, as though secrets slept beneath roots. The pig stopped dead, let him catch breath, then set eyes on him again. Dark, patient, insistent. He almost wanted to laugh at himself. A battle-hearted man, once trained with steel and maps, now waiting for direction from a stray swine. But beneath the humor boiled a steady truth. He could no longer pretend he wasn't meant to see whatever lay in these woods. The trail wound on, and so did he. Each step became less about resisting and more about surrendering to whatever message this animal carried in its bones. The air shifted. He noticed it in the way the smell of pine gave way to something heavier, almost metallic, like iron left in rain too long. His ears caught silence where there should have been rustle. The pig bristled, turning in place on its short legs, nostrils wide. He slowed, raising his chin, sweeping with his eyes the way any patrol leader once had. And then he saw it, the faint shape of structure, crouched low in green shadows. At first it seemed like a trick, timber stacked by storms, nothing more. But no, the lines bore human order. Logs cut straight, angled corners hidden behind a lattice of moss and weeds that had kept it secret. A hut. Smaller than a farmhouse, stronger than a shed. His chest tightened. He hadn't planned for this. Animal trails leading to water, that was reasonable. But a pig leading directly to a buried cabin out here? That set every old nerve on fire. Caution rooted him in place. He let eyes run the perimeter from one crack of light to another. Nothing stirred save midges hovering. No smoke curling skyward. No dog bark. No clatter. The windows, if those black cross slats still counted as windows, were swallowed by moss, down dark as bullet wounds. He knew better than to believe silence was safety. Silence often meant the opposite. The pig, though, made no move to leave. It padded forward, climbing the old stone step up to the bent porch, and sat heavy. Its gaze fixed on him, demanding. The veteran's throat dried. He'd learned to read signs. Broken blades of grass, bent thorns, prints pressed soft in mud. He crouched low, tracing the earth. What he saw shook him deeper than he admitted aloud. No print of deer, no track of bear. Human tracks, thin, weeks old maybe, still lingered. And closer to the door, pressed fresh in dust, a newer trace. Whoever or whatever came here, it wasn't ancient history. His fingers lifted from the dirt as though burned. Circling wide, he studied walls running green with lichen, nails rusted out, boards swollen with damp. A cabin, abandoned, clearly. Yet a latch at the back door bore new scrape, wood gouged not by years, but by a hand that forced its way inside. He exhaled slow. If this was refuge, it was a haunted one. Branches above creaked like whispers. His pulse dragged. Should he turn back? His training cried it, urged him not to cross thresholds blind. But the pig hadn't budged. It stood guard, eyes dark and settled, the sort of stance soldiers take when they know their ground. He cursed under his breath. Strange duty, taking orders from a creature like this. Yet stranger still was the pull in his gut that he must see. He paced around the far corner. The roof sagged, but held, blanketed under moss thick as carpet. A narrow slit of a window revealed interior dark. He stepped closer, cupping his hand against glass cracked into a spider map. Not much light inside, but he caught glimpses, shapes of a table, a cot hunched in corner, shadows long as bone. His breath stilled. The pig grunted once, sharp. He whipped around. No danger behind, only the animal still at its post. That sound was no alarm. It was insistence. Enter. He shook his head, teeth gritted, as if arguing with his own memory. Didn't matter if the place reeked of abandonment. Latch marks fresh meant someone used it. Could be squatter, could be worse. Still, suspicion gnawed sharper than fear. He weighed options. Walk away, keep silence, let his life remain as hollow as it had been. Or push forward, open the place, claim answers to questions he hadn't even asked yet. His hand brushed the scar on his ribs. So many decisions had already carved him hollow. One more carried little difference. The pig stomped hoof against wood plank of porch, an odd sharp sound against rot. That did it. He swung back toward the cabin, shoulders rolling as if toward fireline. Habit ran strong. He stopped short of the door, scanning treeline again, measuring exits, listening for signs of watch. There was none but his own rhythm of blood. Slowly, one boot up, then the other, until he stood on the rotted porch. The wood sagged beneath, groaning memory of years, but it held his weight. Pig at his side rose, snout pressing door seam, snuffling, urgent. He dropped his pack from shoulder with muffled strike against planks, palmed the door. Broken latch clung loose, hanging dead. He need only push. For a long breath he froze, images cutting through him. The desert tents, bunkers stripped bare after ambush, city rooms laced with wires waiting to spring. This door could open onto anything. Death, memory, or nothing but dust. Still, everything in him whispered that the path led here. All of it, the silence, the pig, the climb. His chest filled. One sharp push, perhaps, and the truth would set claws in him. Or he could retreat and let the questions rot, undisturbed. The pig squealed, short and hard, breaking the hush. He lifted his hand, scarred palm meeting splinter edge. Decision hung there in the weight of a single breath. Would you keep walking, or would you open it? That's what I ask you now. He stood in that silence, the animal urging, the cabin looming. And he knew what came next could not be turned aside. The door gave under his push with the hesitant sigh of wood long soaked and dried again. The smell inside wasn't the simple emptiness of abandonment. It was layered. First, the damp rot of water on timber, then the sour of iron nails weeping rust. Beneath that, something sharper. Smoke, faint and cold, as though a fire had been fed within weeks, not years. He froze on the threshold, listening. Silence. Only his own heartbeat thudding, loud against his chest. The pig pressed through beside him with a swift determination that startled him. It did not sniff aimlessly like livestock would. Its snout went straight to the edge of the cot in the far corner. He stepped in slower. Eyes adjusted to gloom, drawn shapes out of shadow. The cabin was small, barely wider than his arms stretched across. A table sagged on one side, one leg braced with stacked stone. A shelf carried mismatched jars, labels curling, dust thick. But the dust was broken in places, finger tracks. He bent low to study. They weren't old. Someone had moved here after the insects, and weather had already started claiming it. He swallowed hard, scanning with soldier's exactness. Every object had to prove itself innocent. His gaze touched the cot, wool blanket pulled crooked, imprint sunk into thin mattress. He pressed his hand to it and pulled away sharp. Heat. Not blazing, but warm, alive. Whoever lay there had been gone only hours, maybe less. His pulse raced into a rhythm of combat. The pig grunted, sharp, angry almost. He hushed it, nerves flaring. He checked corners. No shapes hiding, no ambush. Still, he did not trust what he could not see. He moved step by step, weight measured so boards wouldn't scream. Beside the cot stood a wooden crate. Its lid carried scratches in a language only force makes. He lifted it with shaking hand. Inside, military gear. Webbed belts, worn canteen, a folded jacket. His throat went dry. He dragged the fabric free, unfolded in the low light. Familiar pattern, dulled with time, but unmistakable. The same issue his unit had carried years ago. Not surplus, not look-alike. The stitching, the patch scars, these were lived. He staggered back, heart slamming. He didn't know if he was staring at his past or some mirror of it. He turned the coat in his hands. Near the cuff, a stain darker than soil. Dried blood. Old. His gut clenched. He remembered that hue too well. He dropped it back into the crate as though it burned. The pig shoved its face against his leg, grounding him in living heat. Then his eye caught something smaller, tucked amid the gear. A battered field journal, its cover leather, edges chewed by damp, but pages fat with writing. He hesitated, then opened. His breath snagged on the first lines. Stories of missions scrawled in blunt hand, dates scraped down. But as his eyes reckoned the words, recognition chilled him. The entries described operations too close to his own memory. Locations he had marched, ambushes he had survived. He flipped pages. Then he froze. A description nearly word for word matched the night he lost 2 men in firefight. But the voice on the page, this nameless hand, claimed the retreat had been ordered. It described corridors of command directing sacrifice. His stomach hollowed. He had always believed it was his failure, his command decision. But here, in black scratch, someone said the opposite. He dropped onto the sagging stool, journal trembling in his grip. The pig pressed closer, nuzzling his thigh, as if sensing the crack in him. His mind spiraled back to cold nights when he stared at stars, thinking of men buried because of him. Years of shame and replay. Had it been a lie carried to him? Or was this book a forgery to twist him? He could not know. But the weight of possible truth pressed heavier than any wound. He flipped further. Pages detailed shipments, missing crates, hidden agendas buried under reports. Some passages were nearly unreadable. Others snapped with clarity, listing names and decisions that shaped his every torment. He closed the book sharp, breath ragged. If true, then his grief had been built on another man's betrayal. If false, then his own weakness had left him vulnerable to illusions. The pig gave another sound, low this time, almost mourning with him. He stared down at it. "Why here?" he whispered. "Why me?" Words filled the space as if meant for unseen ears. The pig didn't answer, only steadied him the way its presence had all along. He stood and began circling the room again, eyes shivering across shadows. Food tins lined corner shelves, their metal not corroded but recently pried. One can open, spoon left resting inside. His heart kicked again. Whoever lived here, used this shelter. They might return, any breath. He should leave, every instinct urged. Yet leaving meant carrying a mystery jagged enough to tear him apart. He stuffed the book into his pack on reflex. His fingers shook on the zipper. Some part of him screamed not to tamper, not to steal. Another voice whispered that he had no choice. Answers lived here. If command had manipulated futures, then silence was complicity. His boots scraped floor loud as thunder. He hated how clumsy he felt, how loud his every move reverberated. He crossed back to the door, pulse still wild. The pig had set itself by threshold guard, bristling hair raised. It snorted, ears flicking like radar. Tension rippled in the silence, as if both man and animal expected company. The veteran braced hand on doorframe, drawing slow breath. Shame, anger, suspicion, all coiled. For a long moment he stood there, eye pressed to gap in plank. The forest beyond lay in dusk quiet, no motion. Yet he felt watched. Back, his glance took in the cabin, broken yet inhabited, loaded with gear and a book that threatened his very story. He felt the war closing in again, though decades away. Then the pig nudged him toward the clearing, certain, insistent. One last look, he told himself. His gaze landed on the cot, the hollow depression still whispering body heat. Whoever belonged here, they were near. Maybe hunting, maybe hiding in brush. He was trespasser now. He shouldered his pack and shoved through the doorway, the animal pressing behind. Once outside, air flooded him, fresher though coated with dread. He clenched fists, eyes scouring treeline. Nothing. Only the whistle of returning wind and branches rubbing each other in complaint. He stood there shuddering, journal cutting into back through pack cloth. The pig exhaled, almost like a sigh. Then it bumped him again with steady head, as if to say, "You're not alone, though the truth cuts." He swallowed a bitter laugh, choked out by pain. He never thought saving grace would come shaped like bristle and snout. He turned his back on the ruin but carried the ruin inside. Boots dragged, then quickened. Somewhere behind, that hidden tenant might be watching, furious at intruder. But he no longer cared. He had lived long with ghosts. What were a few more? The pig stayed tight by leg, its steps striking earth with unwavering rhythm. The cabin receded into shadow, swallowed by forest. But he knew what he carried now would not recede. The weight of words heavier than rifle, heavier than guilt, heavier than years. And though dread chased his every step, one thing caught him firm. The animal would not desert him. When all else darkened, at least that loyalty stayed. The forest was darker on the way out. Not darker in light. The sun still hovered above treetops. But something in him had shifted, made each branch cast heavier shadow. The journal pressed against his back through the pack as if it had teeth. He couldn't shake the weight of it. Years of guilt tied to his own name might now belong to others. That didn't ease him. It left him hollow, furious, adrift. The pig walked steady at his side, shoulder thick, hide damp with the sweat of effort. Now and then it nudged his leg, reminding him he wasn't moving alone. Small thing, but each touch grounded him. Out here, without that presence, he might have folded into the moss and let silence swallow him. He thought about dropping the book, thought about tossing it into a creek so its words would rot. But when he touched the pack straps, he couldn't do it. Each page, true or false, sang with unfinished answers. And yet those words carved his chest open as if every line cut deeper into scars that had only begun to scab. At a low slope, where soil was slick from spring seeps, he slipped to one knee. The pig came quick, circling, pressing snout into his arm. He gritted teeth, pushing away. Not hurt, he muttered, though the truth was less about fall and more about how the cabin had stripped him raw. He leaned back against pine, breath shaking. The pig settled beside him, close enough that their heat mixed, and waited. It did not move until he was ready. That patience unsettled him at first, then softened him. Men always wanted explanations, reasons, strategies. This animal wanted nothing beyond presence. He whispered, low, I carried men out once, left pieces of myself with them. How do I set that down? The words surprised him. He expected silence to devour them. Instead, the pig gave a low grunt, eyes calm. Not agreement, not dismissal. Just witness. They pressed on. Hunger nipped him sharp. He reached the river bend where he had first seen the animal, dipping hands into cold water. He splashed his face, drank quick. The pig pawed at bank until it unearthed roots, crunching them with sharp sound. He chuckled once, despite himself. Strange feast. Soldier and pig sharing half-bitter roots and stream water. Yet it steadied him more than hot meals ever had in cities. Evening drew in. They built a fire low under shale overhang. He laid wood as he had laid ambush snares long ago, small, tight, hidden. He struck sparks, coaxed flame from stubborn tinder. Orange glow cracked thin warmth across their faces. He studied the animal across flame, ears twitching, eyes reflecting red. Guess it's you and me now, he said. His voice rasped, part laugh, part bitter truth. The pig curled at edge of firelight, close enough for heat, far enough for space. Its presence rang louder than words. He felt a tide of shame rise. For years he avoided men for fear they'd see him fractured. Now here was a beast, showing loyalty without question. He leaned into fire crackle, whispered, You're steadier than I am. Nightmares came as he slept. Broken images. Dust storms laced with fire, comrades shouting through smoke, men falling with no one left to hear their final sound. He woke, gasping, sweat chilled. Fire burned low. The pig stirred, lumbered near. nudged him until he steadied. He rubbed bristled hide, breath evening. The animal pressed its weight into him until tremors stopped. He had never told anyone about the screaming nights. Now he didn't have to. This creature seemed to know. By dawn, storm clouds bruised sky. They moved under dripping boughs. Rain came thin at first, then harder. He shaped a lean-to with branches, his old training returning and muscle memory. Pig huddled close inside, snout resting near his knee. Drops rattled against roof, steady rhythm. In that half-dark, he admitted truths he had buried. I thought I was the one to blame. Thought every grave was hammered by my orders. He paused, throat raw. Maybe I was blind. Maybe I wanted to be. Pig grunted, laid heavier. He took that as answer enough. Through days of return trail, they shared small victories. Pig's keen nose found a patch of edible shoots. It rooted fresh bedding from fern fronds. Each gesture said, "I will carry part of the load." He realized he was no longer measuring steps as patrol, but pacing with a companion. A difference subtle, yet enormous. He found himself speaking more openly. Told the pig things he had never whispered to priest or comrade. Regrets, layered like sediment. Wishes lost. Quiet self-disgust. The pig listened, silent, only shifting now and then to remind him it was still there. Strange therapy under dripping trees. But it worked. Each confession left him lighter, even if only by ounces. One night he awoke to find the pig pressed against his side, warmth radiating. He accepted it without flinch. Something in him had bent. His distrust eroded not by logic, but by stubborn presence. He realized healing did not arrive in grand sweeps. It came through loyal nearness, through unasked partnership. By the end of fourth day, his steps fell into rhythm with the pig's. Their breathing matched, their rests aligned. He stopped seeing it as animal leading. Now it was companion walking with him. The journal still burned his back each mile, yet that burden felt shared somehow. No one else had steadied him after combat. Family drifted. Fellow soldiers scattered. But this pig, unassuming, held loyalty as firm as any oath sworn under flag. He understood then. Life doesn't grant you the companion you expect. Sometimes it offers one shaped strange, yet truer than all others. He ran a hand along bristled neck, voice low but certain. We'll face whatever waits together. Pig snorted, simple and final. The rains came sudden, as they do in high timber country. Thick drops slapping leaves, ground quick to mud. The veteran pulled his hood low, though fabric soaked through in minutes. He sought a rise where water could not pool. Pig kept pace, hooves striking a surer rhythm than his boots. When he ducked under spruce limbs, the animal pressed in beside him, shaking rain off its hide with stubborn energy. They settled in fast. Years of soldier fieldcraft returned to his hands without thought. Lash limbs together, stack fern, layer bark for shelter. The pig rooted around, dragging brush with surprising persistence, as though it knew the drill. Working side by side left him halfway smiling, a crooked grin not worn in decades. Rain hammered their roof, but inside the small lean-to, warmth grew solid with their shared breath. He measured the storm's patience by drops cascading steady through branches. Storms had always been like sieges to him. You wait, conserve, whisper when speech is needed. The pig lay close, breathing deep, a living sandbag against despair. In pause between thunder, he whispered things once sealed tight. The guilt of being alive, the scorn of men who demanded reasons he could not provide. Words drummed out with the storm, and the pig never judged. Its only reply was the weight of body against him. By morning, rain lightened to mist. They pressed on through slick earth. The pig seemed altered, more than follower, less than beast of burden. It found paths where footing lasted, steered them away from sink and hollow. Once the pig jerked hard to the left, blocking his stride. He cursed until he saw a fissure ahead where soil had washed out. Deep pit, swamp slick. He swallowed hard, realizing its sense saved him a broken body, or worse. He rubbed its head without shame. Hunger sharpened. Game avoided open ground after storm, but the pig snuffled earth until it uncovered mushrooms clustered on nurse logs. He studied the caps, soldier turned scavenger, mind dragging old training of edible versus poison. Safe enough. He roasted them near a small flame that night, pig crunching roots it had pawed. Human and animal both fed, silence thick but purposeful. As days wove forward, he noticed how often his lips moved with thought, how freely he spoke, out loud, as if explaining himself. The pig walked calm, never straying far. He admitted to it the voices of nights when he doubted whether to keep living, admitted the bitterness at villagers who eyed him as broken driftwood. He chuckled bitter when confessing, talking to a pig like some priest. But the animal kept steady, and weight lifted from chest every time he emptied those confessions into air. Isolation carried edges, sharp as razors. Cut long enough, and man bleeds out. Yet here was another creature willing to shoulder a sliver. Strange therapy, bristle and grunt. He began catching himself looking forward to each small sound the pig made, a grunt at dawn, a snore at night. Compared to silence, those sounds felt like lifelines braided within darkness. One cold dawn, fog rose heavy, reducing forest to smoky corridors. His heart jolted with memories of battlefield smoke, friends lost in whiteout chaos. Fear spiked sharp. He stumbled, knelt, shaking. Vision blurred, not from fog but from years collapsing on him. The pig touched nose to his wrist, grounding him to what was present. That touch snapped him back. He looked into its blank dark eyes and realized something steady returned his gaze. He whispered, "If you weren't here, I'd vanish." Pig gave a grunt, and he believed it answered yes. Another day, while tracking ridgelines, he spotted fresh scat of predator. Bear, perhaps. Anxiety surged. He listened, scanning treeline. Pig stiffened, ears sharp, nose cutting air. Instead of fleeing, it planted feet in earth like soldier grounding stance. Seeing such raw defiance coaxed him upright. He raised length of branch, eyes sharp again. Nothing lunged, nothing broke cover. But he learned how the animal stood his guard, same as he once had for others. That shared purpose eased him. He was not sole sentinel anymore. Evenings taught him more. When fire kindled, he told stories, not explanations, but fragments. About boyhood rivers, brothers never written home, the patrol that ended with dust and silent bodies. Words cracked, voice hoarse, but space no longer swallowed them whole. Pig's ears twitched to each sound. That quiet audience unlocks parts of him long rusted shut. You know how some fences rot until they collapse under slightest weight? That's how his isolation behaved. Pig pressed against it, not with force, but by daily presence. And each day, boards crumbled, gap widening until he could breathe beyond. He often sat with hand resting along its hide, neither speaking nor needing to. That contact said more than voices. When dawn painted mountaintops pink, Pig trotted forward again, and he followed without pause. Steps no longer dragged heavy with dread. Instead, His stride found pace to match. Unlikely shepherd guiding a broken soldier. And in that loyal companionship, the walls of loneliness broke apart for good. Wind shifted in the tall trees, first gentle, then harder, bending crowns of pine until they creaked and groaned like ships under stress. The veteran raised his chin and felt air sharpen against his skin. Storms, or worse, that kind of wind always signaled change. The pig halted, bristles rising, ears twitching. Side by side, they listened. No bird songs, no chatter. Just the lean, raw sound of forest bracing itself. He muttered to himself, "Something's off." Old instincts flared awake. By the time they reached a narrow gully, shadows thickened. Each trunk looked like a figure waiting. He knew illusions well, but that didn't ease the unease. His hand drifted over the scar across ribs, as if memories lived raw beneath. Then came sound, low growl carried by shifting gust. His spine tightened. Pig froze, eyes fixed into scrub ahead. Growl deepened. Predator. Wolf or cat, hard to know. He lifted a branch like a short spear, posture sliding into battle stance without thinking. He whispered quick, "Stay close." Pig didn't need orders. It stepped between him and brush like a shield, lowering broad head. How absurd, he thought. A pig bristling in defiance, guarding him. Still, courage poured from that stance, and he drew strength by mirror. Brush tore and sudden shape lunged. A lean wildcat, ribs sharp, fur matted by hunger, eyes yellow in dim light. It came fast, too fast for human, but the pig surged first. It rammed body forward, tusks catching cat's flank. Snarl erupted, claws scraping hide. He swung branch hard, striking cat's shoulder. The creature yowled, twisting away, retreating into scrub's dark. Silence flooded back through ringing ears. His breath heaved. He dropped branch, squatted, ran hand to pig's side. Fresh scratch glistened on hide, shallow but angry red. His voice rough. "You saved me." Pig snorted, shook dirt, and pressed close. He clenched jaw, fury not at cat but at himself, for once more needing saving. Yet as he pressed palm harder, steadiness warmed him. Partnership sealed not in talk, but in blood stirred. They rested after encounter, back against stone ridge. He tore shirt hem, pressed makeshift bandage to pig's wound. It didn't resist, only stood patient beneath his hands. Strange inversion, veteran patching beast that had shielded his life. He sighed low. "Guess we protect each other now." His words trembled, heavier than he expected. Pig grunted soft reply. Night fell unsure. Wind died, replaced by eerie still. He built small fire while eyes darted to forest edges. Each crack of branch felt like stalker returning. Sleep wouldn't come. Shadows writhed with ghosts. When eyelids sagged, dreams broke them open again. Visions of the journal, words rewriting old battles, faces blaming him. Every gust outside felt like enemy shift-in trench. He clutched pig's hide through restless hours to keep sense solid. By dawn, fog smothered ground. Forest hushed, all color drained. He raised collar and marched forward, but dread dogged every step. Pig kept tight at heel, sometimes nuzzling calf when hesitation seized him. Then came new unease, a sense of eyes marking them from unseen cover. He stopped sharp, scanning all angles. Nothing but fog, yet his gut churned. He breathed clipped, muttered, "We're not alone." For a long mile they moved as quarry, not hunter. Each broken twig behind them whispered pursuit. He gripped branch, heart slamming, just like first tour in foreign desert. Pig bristled, ears scanning arcs. The veteran realized bond deepened yet again. The two of them tuned to single fear. Not simple animal instinct, but shared awareness of unseen watcher. Midday broke gloom. They reached stream bend where moss grew heavy. Cool air smelled metallic. Pig halted, striking hoof against stone. He followed gaze. Across bank lay clear imprint. Boot track recent, pressed sharp. His mouth dried. Not his. Someone else nearby. Blood charged his face. Whoever used that cabin still hunted these woods. Memories unfurled tight, ambushes scripted by unseen hands. Rage licked edges of fear. He crouched, touching print. Damp still clung. Hours old. Pig gave harsh grunt, teeth clicking. He knew they stood on same ground as stranger. Options dwindled. Flee forest fast or confront truths waiting. He touched pack. Journal lay heavy, words within flaring suspicion. For first time he admitted he feared pursuit not of man only, but of ghost he carried. That night fire cracked thin. He spoke to Pig soft. "They know we've seen too much." His eyes searched stars broken by canopy. He realized battlefields never leave. They only trade uniforms for trees, bombs for silence. He trembled, whispered, "I can't outrun them again." Pig leaned close, almost embracing him with brute warmth. He accepted, shoulders shaking. Partner, not pet. As days passed, hostility of forest grew. Roots snagged boots, bird calls eerie. Once rocks clattered from cliffside above, nearly striking. Accident or someone's hand? He couldn't decide. Paranoia carved raw edges, yet Pig's grounding held him steady. He kept hand always ready on branch spear, scanning. Then dream blurred into waking. He imagined voices calling his name, taunting. Could be memory, could be hunter. Pig roused him with sharp nudge, broke spell. He gasped, kept awake by loyalty beside him. He realized terror no longer his alone. Animal carried watch with him, taking half his fear. One dusk, while forging through willow brake, sound broke clear. A whistle, too careful to be creak. He froze. Pig snarled deep, lower than he'd ever heard. For a moment, silence pressed like stone. Then nothing. Whoever whistled melted away. Veteran's hands shook, rage bubbling with suspicion that cabin's keeper stalked close. Yet he chose not to chase. Instead, he set vow hard. Protect Pig the way Pig protected him. He touched bristled back, voice ragged. "I swear, nothing takes you." Not forest, not ghost, not man, Pig settled, eyes darker than night, but eased at vow. And he realized then partnership sealed beyond choice. Once soldier to troop, now soldier to this unlikely comrade. Honor demanded return loyalty. Forest hostile still pressed, whispering threats, clawing sanity. Yet they marched unified. Where shadows thickened, they walked tighter. Where dread came howling, they anchored each other. Dangerous comfort, born from peril, but the truest he had ever known. Step by step, they carved fragile sanctuary inside hostility. In that crucible, he sensed transformation. No longer broken man trudging alone, no longer pig wandering stray. Together they became pair, defiant against worse shapes of forest and memory alike. Unseen watchers might lurk, predators may return, storms may rage, but loyalty welded them. That loyalty, louder than fear, kept their boots striking earth in rhythm, carrying them deeper toward destiny, waiting at cabin once more. The decision stalked him for days, carried heavy in his gut like iron. He could not shake the sense that the cabin itself remained unfinished business, a wound left open, bleeding its silence into his steps. The journal in his pack gnawed at him night and day. You've known that feeling. Words not shouted, but whispering at every pause, demanding you return. That's what drove him. Not logic, not reason, but the way betrayal lingered like smoke in his lungs. The pig felt it too. Each mile it grew more restless, circling when he hesitated, nudging his thigh, grunting sharp whenever he sat too long by campfire. As though it understood there was no peace along these trails until the man faced what he had fled. By dawn on the 5th day, he admitted aloud, "We're going back." The pig gave a bark-like squeal, almost triumphant. They set pace heavier than before, boots breaking moss in urgent rhythm. Rain clouds brushed the ridgeline, but he pressed on. His breath chafed inside him, nerves coiling at what they might find. When treeline dipped toward familiar hollow, he stopped hard. Even from distance, he sensed change. The air no longer fell as simple hush. It carried weight, like a room where someone had just spoken and the echo still hung. When he broke brush into the small clearing, his pulse roared. The cabin crouched the same, sagging roofline, moss-caked. Yet something shifted. Faint tracks pressed into soil, sharp, fresh. He knelt, fingers pressing damp earth. Boots. Not his. Hours old, maybe less. He rose, eyes sweeping treeline. Silence pressed closer than any ambush he'd known. The pig growled low, ears flicking at shadows. He circled wide, senses screaming, "Watch!" Backlatch that had hung loose before now bore deeper gouge, splinterwood fresh. Someone had entered again. He clenched fist, scar under ribs tightening like it relived shrapnel. "We shouldn't," he whispered. But even as words left mouth, he knew refusal meant eternal unrest. He forced one breath and pushed door inward. Inside, air was changed. Stale shadow still clung, yet a newer scent cut through. Sweat, faint tobacco. Torch stub guttered cold on table. Someone had left recent, too close for comfort. The pig shoved past him again, snout to floor, tracing loops as though tracking ghost prints. He moved toward cot. The blanket lay folded this time, precise, military sharp. No reckless wanderer had been here. Someone deliberate, practiced. His chest hammered as he reached shelf. Tins gone. Space bare where once they had lined. Whoever returned had taken supplies. He turned toward table. His throat closed when he saw what rested there. The journal. Not tucked in his pack where he thought safe, but open on table, pages splayed wide as if set for him. His knees weakened. He reached shaky hand, flipped page. New writing filled margin. Ink fresh. Words scrawled jagged. He devoured phrases. They spoke directly, second person, accusing. You carried blame that was never yours. You were spared truth for their gain. This forest keeps witnesses. His stomach burned ice. He rasped, "Who are you?" Eyes swept walls, corners bare, yet presence weighed heavy. Pig pressed against him, hair bristled. He flipped further. Final entries cut like knife. Lists of names, officers above his head, orders cast down quiet, lives traded for unseen deals. Then, underlined scratch. The patrol was never meant to survive. Collateral, by command. His vision blurred with rage. For decades, shame had starved him hollow. Now Page claimed he had been pawn, sacrifice planned. His chest cracked, sound ripping from him raw. He slammed journal shut, hands trembling. "No," he growled, though denial rang hollow. Tears stung, despite discipline drilled deep. He staggered to wall, fist driving into rotten timber until splinters pierced skin. Pig squealed sharp, circling close, pressing head into his thigh. He dropped, shoulders shaking as storm broke. You've likely seen men cry when they swore they never would. That kind of weeping is more like a battle wound, tearing open, too long stitched by silence. He sobbed into bristled hide, words choking. I carried them all. Carried graves in my chest. And you tell me, none of it was mine? Rage and grief tangled in one choking flood. The pig did not move away. It simply leaned heavier, anchoring him. Minutes blurred. He rose finally, breath ragged. Palms bled, shallow but steady. He faced table again, eyes cold. Betrayal lanced deeper than bullets ever had. But truth, however jagged, felt necessary. He scooped journal into pack, clumsy. He wouldn't run anymore. He would carry truth, not lies. Pigs snorted, stamping porch once they exited. Rain began to weep through canopy. Cabin loomed darker than before, host to ghosts and treachery. He met its gaze one last time. You stay buried, he muttered, but I won't. Then he turned, pushing into forest. Storm smacked his face, but inside, storm had already broken. They walked away slower, those steps steadier. He felt brittle, yet lighter. For once, Scar didn't own him. The truth had cracked him open. But in that wound, loyalty of pig kept him upright. Whatever awaited beyond would not crush him as long as that stubborn companion walked ahead. And in loyal rhythm of their march, forest swallowed cabin at last behind veils of rain. Rain softened into mist by dawn, the kind that soaks clothes without sound. He trudged on with the pig close, each step drawing him further from the cabin, yet deeper into himself. The journal's truth clanged in his thoughts, unbearable to carry alone. But he wasn't alone anymore. That was the change, subtle as breath, fierce as survival. They halted beneath cedar groves where branches braided low overhead. He set his pack down, spine aching. The pig lay against him fast, bristled hide rough but steady, anchoring his storm. He placed a hand along its side, fingers trembling. They lied through every channel, he whispered. The words felt carved from bone, and I let myself believe it was all mine. Pig grunted, pressing heavier against him, answering in silence that judgment had no ground here. For long minutes he let tears ease onto hide, salt mixed with forest damp. He didn't hide it. Couldn't. The animal bore it as if it had been born to that purpose. For the first time in decades, he allowed brokenness plain in open daylight. Healing begins that way, with someone, anyone, holding ground while you fall apart. When storm inside settled, he rose, fire flickering anew in gaze. He turned to the pig, voice hoarse. We walk forward different now. No more lies ruling me. He lifted branch to serve as staff, scarred hands gripping its knots. Pig snorted as though approving reluctant resolve. Together they pressed down slope toward stream beds glinting pale in gray dawn. Along the trail they met thorn and stone, each obstacle mirrored by the old burdens rising back. But this time he shouldered pain differently. Not just a man against ghosts, but man beside companion. When sharp briar tore his arm, Pig rushed ahead into wider path, claiming way through. He smiled, small, rare expression. Teaching me still, aren't you? At afternoon they reached meadow clearing, sodden with rain. He built fire low, coaxing warmth out of damp kindling. Pig lay curled across his boots, heat flowing upward. He gazed into smoky threads. Long nights alone had been torture. Now, silence carried different weight. Shared. He spoke slow. I thought survival alone was strength. But strength's never been about that. It's who steadies you when you sag. Pig made contented grunt, half asleep. That sound loosened band around his heart. Dreams shifted that night. Less of death, more of comrades laughing before the blast. He woke crying, but laughter lingered in memory, not horror only. Pig stirred, pushed head into a crook of his arm. He breathed out relief, thanking silently for presence that kept nightmares from devouring him wholly. Fog lifted at dawn. They moved along ridge toward high timber. Veteran's stride found rhythm with Pig's plod. Something inside him adjusted. He no longer drifted apart from world. Each footprint marked progress toward wholeness, not collapse. He marveled that beast once stranger now served compass, therapy, guard. It felt like providence, carved from wilderness. Later, when they crossed river by felled log, he staggered mid-span. Water roared beneath, dizzying. Panic pricked, reminder of fields lost across sea. But Pig crossed first, looked back, grounding him. He gritted teeth, focused eyes on that bristled frame. He made it across because loyalty drew him solid. On far bank he knelt, panting, and whispered thanks into Animal's ear. Sometimes healing lives in such small victories. Days wound onward. He rebuilt campfires, foraged, scouted routes, all with Pig steady at side. Each act carried less weight of survival and more tone of living once again. Healing wasn't light flooding in. It was steady drip carving hollow stone. He felt edges soften. One dusk, as sun bled red through trees, he stood still, eyes narrowing on Pig grazing under shrubs. He thought of men long lost, comrades never returning. Then he realized grief would never vanish, yet he no longer bore it solitary. Pig's loyalty stitched cross grains into hollow fabric of his chest. It was enough to keep moving. He placed palm on bristled back, voice calm. The lies stay buried in that cabin, but us, we keep walking. We choose what's ahead, not what was stolen. Pig snorted approval, stamping hoof into soil. That gesture sealed promise stronger than any command oath. Rain returned mild, forest breathing damp again. As they walked, he hummed off key, tune buried from youth. Habit lost in war, found again through unlikely friendship. Pig perked ears as though listening to music, perhaps hearing hope layered in rough sound. That night, under canopy pierced by rare, clear stars, he gazed upward and felt less like intruder, more like participant of Earth's rhythm. Pig dozed, belly rising heavy with breath. He whispered final truth of day. I'm still broken, friend. but not alone broken. Shared strange peace answered him through still boughs. Journey outward, yet waited, but war inside quieted. In bristled loyalty, he found renewal. Healing didn't roar, it whispered, breathed, grunted. It curled heavy against boots at night and refused to leave when truth flayed open scars. That kind of loyalty had taught him to breathe in trust again. The cabin where lies festered lay behind sealed. Ahead stretched open trail, crooked yet welcoming. His past clung but did not chain. With the pig beside him, healing became not goal but daily march. And so he paced forward into unknown dusk, each step proof of loyalty deeper than wounds. Morning broke, softer than any he had known in weeks. The storm had washed the air clean, leaving the forest smelling of pine and wet soil rather than dread. He rose, stiff but steadier, pulling straps of his pack across shoulders worn from carrying both weight and memory. The pig grunted, already up, rooting damp ground for breakfast. He crouched low, rubbed its hide, voice quiet. Time we head out of here. They began climbing gradual slope that pointed toward lowland exits. Every step felt less captive, more chosen. You no longer felt hunted in same way. The cabin, though behind them, still tugged his mind with all it contained. Lies, betrayals, ghosts. But he refused to let it leash him blind. Instead, he set eyes on trail forward, guided by snout and steady trot of loyal companion. The forest changed character. Where before branches pulled like traps, now they parted easier, as though permitting release. Even sunlight shifted. Shafts pierced canopy to warm moss and pools of gold. He caught himself noticing small beauty. Songbirds returning after silence. Chipmunks darting brittle logs. Each detail reminded him there was still life beyond his shadows. Pig walked ahead, its back glistening from dew, a symbol of persistence against bleak odds. Midday they halted near a stream. He knelt, filled hands with cold water, drank deep. Pig stepped in shallow, splashing as though inviting him to lighten. He chuckled low, rare and genuine. All right, I hear you. We live still. Words weren't dramatic, but to him they tasted like victory. He had carried only grief in his chest for years. Now, with each laugh stirred by the animal, joy cracked surface again. They pressed on. The journal weighed heavy, but differently now. Instead of curse, it carried purpose. He would keep it, not as chain, but as testimony. The lies stopped with him. He thought back to nights of collapse, gunfire echo, screams, his false blame. That chapter closed, with cabin sealed in moss. Now was choice. Walk forward with burden shared by loyal presence, or collapse back to ghosts. He chose forward. By afternoon, the ridge fell away and gave view across distant valley. Hills rolled soft beyond timber. Mist floated thin, light bending across open meadows. He paused, chest swelling. Decades ago, he might have stared only at tactical edges, where to hide, where enemy might cross. Now he saw color, texture, possibility. The pig snorted proudly as if announcing victory for both. On descent, he faltered once on loose shale. Panic sparked. Falls had claimed men in combat. Before fear consumed him, pig pressed tight against his leg, solid brace. He steadied, laughing under breath. Guess you're not done saving me. He rubbed bristles, grateful. Decisions no longer about surviving war, but about honoring loyalty that kept him alive now. Camp that night felt different. Firelight flickered not as shield against horror, but as beacon of continuity. He sat cross-legged, pig stretched at his knees. He took journal from pack, placed it beside but didn't open. Some truths could wait until settled ground. Instead, he studied stars through branches. Once those stars mocked him like eyes of fallen men. Now, though, they looked like lanterns, opening trail. Healing not complete, but wound breathed easier. In night's quiet, he whispered to Pig, "You found me. I thought I'd buried myself for good, but you broke ground and pulled me back." Pig's ear twitched, breath heavy with sleep. He smiled, freer than expected. The trail outstretched long, yet fear no longer roared behind. He recognized injuries would remain, but pain doesn't vanish, it transforms. Each scar would always speak of war, yet with every hoofbeat beside him, he understood scars no longer ruled him. They mapped survival, not defeat. At dawn, final slope curved down to lower woods where trails widened toward settlements. He slowed, unwilling to let conclusion rush. He placed hand firm on Pig's back, walking in rhythm. Behind them, cabins sealed with betrayal. Ahead, valley open with chance. He murmured, "We'll walk it together, till our steps run out." Sunlight broke through canopy full, lighting both man and animal in shared glow. That was the closure. No speech, no banner. Just rhythm of boots and hooves on open path. The bond reframed. Not a soldier led by mission. Not Pig straying lost. But two survivors guiding each other. The forest no longer closed. It opened. Trust walked ahead on four legs. He followed willingly, leaving war behind as best he could. The journey outward had only begun, but something inside had shifted permanent. The cabin stood sealed behind them, but ahead lay open trail and open trust. The forest grew brighter as dawn gave way to open sky, but the deepest shift had already taken place inside him. He carried the journal. He carried the scars. Yet what mattered most was how he no longer carried them alone. Through storms, through dread, through shadows of betrayal, one companion had stayed with him, the pig that would not leave. Together they had faced lies sealed in timber, and together they walked away, toward ground that held promise rather than ruin. The last image etched behind him was of the cabin's warped frame, disappearing into mist. He did not regret leaving it closed. That hut could keep its ghosts. What endured was the truth he had uncovered, and the stronger truth he had lived. Loyalty, found in a shape he never expected. Healing would never mean forgetting. Scars would not fade, but survival had been rewritten into something sturdier. Companionship that endured where all else failed. He realized then that the animal had not led him merely to secrets. It had led him back to his own breath, back to courage that no longer bent beneath guilt. And as you hear this now, ask yourself, what would you have done if the animal led you there? Would you have walked away from the mystery, or followed where it insisted you go? Would you trust what loyalty revealed, even when truth cut against everything you thought you knew? The cabin stood sealed behind them, but ahead lay open trail and open trust. That was the final measure, man and pig moving forward, not as accident, but as bond. And if this story has steadied you, if it sparked a thought about the weight you carry or the unlikely companions who have walked beside you, don't let it end here. Share the path. Leave your reflection in the comments. I want to know how you'd answer the question of trust. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of survival, animals, and the hard bonds that carry us through storms. There are more tales waiting, filled with scars and loyalty, silence and unexpected breath.